Today, we're going to build a Python script which scrapes a RoyalRoad story and produces an EPUB for offline reading. RoyalRoad is a self-publishing website where writers from all over the world publish their stories, usually chapter by chapter, and many of these stories are currently in progress. Some of them are abandoned, some of them are completed. And the biggest downside of this platform is that it doesn't allow you to read those stories offline. In other words, you don't have an option to download them. That is what our today's project is going to try and solve. So by the end of this video, we will hopefully be able to, given the URL of a story like this one, we will be able to fetch the contents of the story. We will be able to extract the metadata, something like title, author, cover image, table of contents. We will be able to download every chapter content. And once we have all this data, we will be able to construct an EPUB, which can then be used on any reader device, which supports that file format. I myself, for example, like to read all my books using Kindle. Now that you understand the goal of today's project, let's jump right into it. And first thing that we need to do is we need to create a repository, which we're gonna give a simple name, something like RoyalRoad to EPUB. We'll create a README for future. We will have some Python gitignore file generated for us. Once we have the repository, we can clone it. Let's create our entry point, something like RoyalRoad to EPUB. Some boilerplate main, running main. And of course we need to do let's try it out. Python RoyalRoad, and it's working. Now, throughout the development phase, I don't like to type things out like Python 3, RoyalRoad to EPUB. That is why we can create an alias, which is going to be short, but it's going to represent the same command. So for example, if I do the RR, which is like RoyalRoad, I can simply copy my command, like this one, and typing out RR is pretty much the same as typing out like Python 3 RoyalRoad. As you can see, it works nicely. Now, before I started recording this session, I did some research to understand what kind of libraries we can use, which are going to help us to reach our goals. It turned out that we will need 3 libraries, and we can put them into requirements.txt. The first library that we're going to use is requests. This library allows us to fetch the raw HTML of the story page. Once we have that HTML, we would need to parse it and somehow navigate it so that we can extract data from some deeply nested nodes inside this HTML. This is where BeautifulSoup comes in. And finally, once we extract all the data that we need to construct an EPUB, and for that we will use an EbookLib. To install these dependencies, we will use pip install using this file. And because I'm on macOS, it doesn't allow me to install those dependencies globally. It tells me that I need to use a virtual environment. That is exactly what we're going to set up next. So it tells me that I need to create a virtual environment, let it be in folder venv, and we need to now activate it. So source venv bin activate, and I'm using fish shell. That is why I'm going to activate using activate fish. Let's rerun the installation script, and all the dependencies are installed now. So we can start working on the main script. So first thing that we need is a story URL. So something looking like this. It has to be supplied by the user of our script. So we're going to use the built-in Python argparse, right, which allows us to simply add some arguments, and we will use just one in the beginning. Let's see. So we can remove the prints. We need to import argparse. Our proc is going to be RoyalRoad to EPUB. Description, what the program does, it's a script RoyalRoad story and produce EPUB. And I don't think we need a block. Next thing that we need to do is we need to add some argument. So parser add argument, let's say like URL, and we can give some help saying that RoyalRoad story URL. Once it's done, we can just run parse-args, right? And we can print story URL, which is going to be simply URL. Let's test it out. So I still have this alias, and now it tells me that, hey, we have usage requirements, is that we need to run our script with some URL, and it's actually required. So we need to update our alias to include the URL of the story. So if you remember, this is like how I set up my alias in Fish. If you're using different shell, you will need to, if you want to follow my road, you will need to find out how to alias commands for your shell, which is likely to differ a bit. So let's take the Mother of Learning, which is top-rated, best completed work. And if you haven't read it, please do. It's absolutely amazing. We updated our alias, and now if we run it, it prints out the URL that we have given to it. So let's get back to our script. So first step, like getting the URL from the user of our script is complete. Next thing is that we need to fetch HTML of our story. So story round will be format string. And let's see. So story HTML is something like page HTML given story URL. Page HTML is going to be our new function. Given string is going to return also guess string. Let's see. So as I said, to achieve that goal, we would need to use requests library. For that, we will try to find documentation of that library. Requests here, documentation, some quick start. We can see that invoking get request is as simple as just running request get using the URL. That means response is with get URL. Now the parsing response content is just text from the response, right? So we can return response text. If we're building for happy path, then I guess this is enough. But as you know, like invoking that get request can return some errors. So there should be some response codes, status codes, right? You can check for status code. You can check whether it's okay or not. And it actually has like this nice helper function that says if it wasn't 200, it will raise some error, right? Let's do the same. So response raise status. Now, if we supply some crappy URL, it will probably throw some weird exception, which we don't really want to see this tag trace of. So let's instead return an optional str in from typing, I think, in import optional. Yep. Let's do the try catch or try except in this case. Try except, but which exception? I don't know. We'll figure it out. I think it's somewhere in the, I saw it somewhere in the documentation, but we need to return none, like in case we got some exception. At the same time, we probably should print some error into std error instead of std out. And for that, I think we need to import Zeus built-in library. So it's going to be Zeus std error, right? Let's see, what should we write? Some failed to fetch HTML content of some URL. And we can print an error itself. And I think that there should be some errors and exceptions. Too many timeouts. I think we need to find it somewhere in API reference. Yeah. So this is like the most common exception that covers probably all the use cases for us. So we can catch that. Oops, requests, exceptions, request exception, right? So what it does is that it tries to fetch data, checks for correct OK status, and returns the content, the HTML of the page. Let's test it out, right? So if not, story HTML, it means like none was returned. We can simply print failed to fetch story URL or story HTML and return. But if we did succeed fetching it, for now we can simply print it out and see how it goes. All right, this looks like we succeeded. Yeah, the whole HTML with JavaScript, with everything included. I mean, everything that is present on that index page. That's great. So next thing is we need to parse that HTML and somehow navigate it. And for that, as I said, we will use BeautifulSoup 4. Right? I think this is like the initial version, BeautifulSoup. Might be mistaken, but it's kind of old one, and then there's like 4. Not entirely sure why this naming, but yeah, we can use that. Where is the documentation? Here it is. We have some quick start, which says that we need to first import stuff, something like that. Then we can create an instance of BeautifulSoup. And we have our story HTML. So this pretty much like parses this whole story HTML, and it will allow us to navigate the parse tree. And we're going to use such thing as, I think, CSS selectors. It should support, yeah, CSS selectors. So let's take a look at the structure of this page. For example, if we want to find the title of our story, it resides somewhere deep in the page. So first parent is HTML, its child is body, then there is like one of the divs, next div child, next child, div. You can see that it's deeply nested. And CSS selectors allow us to query the data based on tags, its classes, its IDs, its positions, like first child, second child, last child, and so on. If you don't know about anything about CSS selectors, please pause the video and do some quick search, do some quick Google search for some quick intro to that, so that you can understand. The topic isn't that hard, but I'm going to assume that you spent a few minutes to try to understand it on your own, if you don't know anything about CSS selectors. All right, so what we can use is we can use probably this interesting class name fig header. Hopefully there's only one fig header on the page. And we can see that the title is using h1 tag. So yeah, and there is fig title class. All right. It seems that we can start extracting the metadata that we want. Let's write another function for that. Story metadata is going to be extract story metadata. Given our instance of soup, so soup already contains like the parsed structure of story HTML inside of it. That's why we pass it to our function. And def, it's gonna accept soup, which is BeautifulSoup, and it's gonna return what? Gonna return some story metadata. Right? Probably let's try doing the optional again. We can return none by default. What is story metadata? Let's try to define it. So we want to find title of the story, the author of the story, and the cover, right? And cover is what it. We can grab the URL of the image if we can find it. I'm not sure like whether each story has a cover image or not. So let's use it as optional string as well. So if we find it, we save it. If not, then we won't. Now, we cannot use this class easily. We want this class to be just simply a container for our data. And to achieve that, Python has this data class annotation, which we can grab from data classes, also built-in thing in Python. So it produces some methods that help us build story metadata and access its properties easily, because we don't need to add any methods to this class whatsoever. So this is like pure structure of data, so to speak. All right, so why did I add optional here? It is because selectors, CSS selectors, might not find the thing. We might give it a wrong selector, so it might not find things on the page, or we might assume something incorrectly. So we would need to check whether our selector found the thing that we wanted or not. So let's start with title. The title, as I said, we can start like with this big header. So soup select, and we actually have select one, right? It says that it will on the current element selector select one. I think select one. It finds the first tag that matches. So even though our selector can match many, it will return the first matched, right? So this is exactly like what we want. We assume there is only a single title on the page, and we are gonna try to find it. And if we find multiple, hopefully the first one is the one that we want. So let's see, what will the selector look like? Again, first class div with class fig header. So div dot represents class fig header. Then it's one of its children. It's actually fig title. It's a div title. Inside of it, there is some div and some h1, h4s. So h1 is what we want. H1. So this is a title. Right? So title is either a tag or none if it failed to find it. So we need to check, right? So if not title, then we need to sys once again write to stdr that we failed to find story title. Yeah, we actually need to add the end lines because write doesn't add it for us. And we can return none. So it's an early exit. If we haven't found a title, we cannot proceed creating our EPUB. Okay. And then if the title is found, we get what? We can print it out to see what we found. All right, so this is us printing the whole story HTML. Let's drop that. We don't need that anymore. All right, so as you can see, it has found our node, this one, and we need to grab contents of this tag. So title is title.text. Let's print it again. And it found our title, which is great. Next thing is let's find the author of the story, which resides also in fig title, except it goes to h4, second span, and an A. And because there are no other A's, we can simply do the h4A. Let's see. We can grab the title selector, author is going to be fig header, fig title. Then there was an h4, and inside of it there is some link. Again, if not author, we've failed to find author, and do the early return. And then the author is going to be the same author text. Let's return the story metadata right away. It's our title, author is our author, and cover URL is none for now. Because it's optional, we can do this for now for testing purposes. Pretty much we have to check if not story metadata, and we can print fail to extract story metadata. We can return, but otherwise it means that metadata is extracted successfully. So let's print it out and see how it looks like. All right. Everything seems to be correct. Mother of Learning is the name, title of the story, and the author is Nobody103. Seems to be correct. So let's do the image or cover URL next. So it's going to be fig header, and there is cover call, cover art container. Let's proceed doing the same thing for cover URL. So fig header. Then there was some next div cover. There was some next div, which is cover art container. And inside of it, there is an image. Again, if our selector isn't correct, it will not find what we want. Fail to find cover image. Although in this case, we don't really want to do that because there might not be a cover image. So we can drop it right? And do it this way, that cover URL equals, yeah, we need to grab an attribute of image. So if we found this node, image node, there is an attribute src for source, and grabbing the source thing, attributes we can access like this, right? So it's going to be cover URL src if cover URL else none, right? So if we found the image cover URL, then we're going to grab its source attribute, and then alright, it complains that it actually, the type is attribute value, but we know that the value is actually a string, so let's just do some shortcut and cast to string, like saying that, okay, type checker, believe us, we know that the attribute contains a string, and cast also comes from typing, if I'm not mistaken. Right, correct. So now it doesn't complain, and we can test it out, and voila, right? We have the URL, which looks to be correct. Let's test it. Yeah, it's the same. Okay. So we now have the story metadata. I believe this is everything that we need. So title, author, cover image. Next thing is we need to extract the links leading to chapters, because every single chapter is a different page. So first we need to collect all the links. As you can see, there are like 6 pages of links. We need to grab all of them, and after that we can proceed grabbing the contents of the chapter. But for now we just need to collect all these links. Again, let's do it in separate method. So story metadata is there. We can highlight which steps we're doing. Extracting metadata. So next step that we're going to do is extracting chapter links. So chapter links, right? Chapter links from the same soup object. And it's pretty much going to return some list of URLs, right? So every single chapter link is a URL. So a tag, we're going to grab this href attribute, which is relative, but I believe it's easy to construct. Yeah, you can see the tooltip showing us the full path, and we can simply concatenate the domain name with this relative path and receive the full URL, which we can then use in our fetch HTML function. All right, so we can see that there is a single table for chapters. It has an ID chapters, which we're going to use in our CSS selectors. And each row, chapter row, has this class chapter row, which is great. And inside of it, there are 2 columns, and they have the same links. So we need to make sure that we don't find 2 of them. We don't duplicate URLs, so we need to find only 1. All right, let's see how we can do that. So chapter links actually and starts as an empty list. At the end of this function, we're going to return them. And now we need to use soup, but not select one. We need to use select, which will find all of the matches. So as I said, table has ID chapters. Table ID is found like this. Chapters, I think, yes, it's chapters. Then we need to find tr with some class chapter row. Inside of it, we will grab the first TD, it means TD first child, right? Because this TR node has two children nodes, TD, TD. And we're saying that, okay, grab me the first one, and it's a tag. Right. Now we need to iterate through this. So for chapter link in, let's just print them for now. Chapter link to see like what we received there. All right, it seems to be working. So we need to extract this attribute href, which is great. So chapter link is actually chapter link href attribute, right? And then we can say that, okay, chapter links, we can append this chapter link. And again, our type is actually attribute value, but we are once again need to help type checker by saying that, okay, I'm pretty sure that href contains a string. That's all that we need. Chapter links. Technically, if our CSS selector failed, then we wouldn't find any chapter links, so we can check for that. For example, like if length of chapter links is 0, right? We can say that, okay, failed to extract chapter links, return, and otherwise we can print found len chapter links. Let's see how it works. Let's clear the screen, run it again. Oh, it says it found 109 chapter links, but there are only like 20 here. We can see that there are 6 pages. If we go to the 6th page, you can see that there's 106, 7, 8. Okay, so there are 109 chapters. We can see that on the page they are somehow they use JavaScript most likely to make this pagination work. So I assume that maybe because our requests library, when it fetches the data, the HTTP server that is hosting this site detects there is no JavaScript and returns the version without JavaScript. We can verify that claim by disabling JavaScript on this page. And if we refresh it, yeah, that's right. So you can see that if the page doesn't have JavaScript enabled, this table contains all the chapters. So this simplifies a bit of work for us. We don't need to handle this pagination thingy. Pretty much once we load the page, parse it, all the chapter links are available without any pagination, which is absolutely amazing for us. It means that we're done with this step. Next, we need to start visiting every single chapter link and extract this content. So we don't want any of that. We pretty much need only this text. We are going to use, once again, BeautifulSoup for that. And there's this chapter content, which contains all chapter content as we want. Right? Scroll down to the end and see. Yeah, it's pretty much a single div that we can pull out of the page and feed it to EPUB, because EPUB is actually also HTML. We can just grab it all, feed it to EPUB constructor, and it should be happy with that. So let's do that. This is so div with chapter content class. All right, so let's do it the same way. First, we define a new function like fetch chapters. We need to feed it chapter links. Right. There's a new function, fetch chapters. Chapter links is our list of links. And it's going to produce what? It's going to produce list of some chapter. Can default to empty list, but what is a chapter? We will use another data class annotation, class chapter. It's going to be what? It's going to be probably title of the chapter, title as a string, and content as a string as well. Okay. Once we open the page, we parse it, we grab the chapter title, even though like it's also here, but I don't think that every single book also has chapter in the text itself. So if we check the second book, The Perfect Run, which is also amazing by the way, it simply has chapter name here on top and doesn't copy it in the chapter content, right? So this will be chapter content div. Yeah. So this is probably just some mother of learning related thingy where the author simply duplicated the chapter name. All right. So what are we gonna do, or how we're gonna handle that? Let's see. Well, first of all, we need to iterate all our chapter links. For chapter link in chapter links, we need to do something. Right? Something. Chapters is a list of chapter. Starts empty. It is returned in the end. So chapter HTML. We will use our function chapter URL, because as you remember, this chapter link is relative and we need to construct chapter URL ourselves. So it's going to be https royalroad.com and chapter link. If I remember correctly, the relative starts with slash. That's why we don't need it here. We fetch the HTML. We then construct an instance of BeautifulSoup using the fetched HTML. It was HTML parser, not mistaken. All right, so actually, if you remember, fetch HTML can fail. So once again, it's going to be optional. So if something fails, we need to indicate that. So if not chapter HTML, we fail to fetch it. So we need to write some error saying, yeah, failed to fetch chapter HTML. And we can return none. All right. Then here, when we say chapters, we can also check if not chapters, if something failed. Same error probably failed. Fetch chapters. Some duplication with errors, but we won't spend too much time on fixing that. All right, so we have chapter HTML, we parse it, and now we need to extract things the same way as we did with metadata. So let's grab this title thingy and add it to our chapter function. Let's find which selector we're going to use. Maybe it will be the same, maybe not. Let's see. Div, chapter page. H1. Which class name? Okay, so fic header. And once again, like H1, it seems that it is the only tag, right, using H1. Let's see whether it works. So it's going to be div fic header, and somewhere below it is an H1. Failed to find a chapter title. We return, if not, title. And then let's also work on content. It was something simple, if you remember. We just need this div chapter content. Right, so it's going to be content. Div chapter content, I think. Chapter content, yeah, correct. So if not content, fail to find chapter content. And then content is just text. And then, now that we have title and we have content, we can append chapter where title is title and content is content. Nice. Let's see how it works. All right, it seems to be it's doing something, but we don't see any progress. And it's because there are 109 chapters, it's probably downloading them one by one. So it would be nice. This was me pressing Ctrl+C, all the stack trace, but it would be nice if we had some progress indicator. How can we do that? So for each chapter link that we're processing, let's do it this way. We are gonna enumerate. So this gives us an index of each chapter link. And we can then say, okay, I'm downloading index +1, because index starts with 0. Downloading chapter out of chapter count. Let's see. Chapter count is just the line of chapter links. Let's see how that goes. Clear the screen. Right. Well, because there are like 109 chapters, yeah, it's gonna spam the screen. We can do it a bit better. We can make it so that this print line is always happening on the same line. To achieve that, we need to say that I don't want to end my print with new line, but I want to end it with garage return, and probably like that flush to true. So some terminals do not flush or do not produce output if the line didn't end with new line. This will or should look a bit nicer. Cool. Right, so it's for every single time we're trying to print downloading chapter, at the end, instead of printing new line and going to the next line, it says, okay, carriage return, and the cursor returns to the beginning of the line. And yeah, there were no errors, so it seems that everything is working correctly, hopefully. We can also say at the end, print download it. chapter count, and it's a formatted string. Let's see how it goes. Sorry for making you wait, but I believe there will be a small issue here that we need to fix. So when you use this carriage return trick, you have to be careful that after you're done using it, the next line that you print, it will actually be printed on the same line, and it will go over the previous line. As you can see, our last print downloaded 109 chapters, and previous line was a bit longer, and we didn't override at all. That's how can we fix that? We can fix that by making this print a bit longer. We can add, for example, many spaces here, but I think it's like L just, right? Like 50. So it will make the string length 50, and it will fill it with spaces. I won't run it again to verify it. Hopefully it works, but once we run it again, we will check it. For now, we can proceed with the script itself. So we have all the metadata that we wanted. We have all the chapters now. So what we need is to build an EPUB book, given all this data. So let's do that. So yeah, build EPUB. To achieve that, we need what? We need our story metadata, and we need our chapters, right? So things that we extracted. Def build EPUB. I will name it like metadata. Story metadata and chapters, which is a list of chapters. I don't know, like the return type yet. Something like that. For now, it says none. Fine. Now, the last library that we haven't used yet, but we installed it via dependencies, is EbookLib. EbookLib, we need to find its documentation, and there is this nice creating EPUB link, which says, right, do the importing. Next, we need to create instance of this ebook. We'll go over this soon, but at the end, we just need to write it. We need to write it and provide some file name for that. Let's do it this way. File name is going to be something something.epub, and this something something is actually title of the book, but we will also replace the spaces with underscores. Now we can save it as this file name, and I assume that everything's going to be fine, so we can just say, let's return this file name as a result. Name, build EPUB, and then we can print our final line saying that saved story as this file name. Nice. All right, so now let's get back to building our ebook. What does it say? It says that we can set title, language, author. I don't know like what the identifier is, so I believe we can skip that. All right, title. We have title and metadata. I will keep language English. I don't know like whether we need that or not, but yeah, usually I read books in English, so it is enough for me. Yeah, let's keep it this way. And the author, I think we also have author. So this is enough for us to build some metadata. This we won't need any extra keys content. We don't have that. Then we can have, we can take a look at this. This is how we add chapters. So first we need to construct some EPUB HTML object with title and file name. As I said, the EPUB is actually HTML. And then we can set content. Let's see. Let's use that as an example. I'll just comment it out for now. So pretty much because we're working with chapters, we're adding chapters to the book. We need to iterate for chapters for each of those. We need to do what? We need to, I'll name it just C. We'll leave language at English. File name, title. Title is, I think it's chapter title. Yeah, we have title of our own. And then file name. We need to give a file name for each chapter. So let's do it this way. Same as we did with the whole file name, we'll use chapter title and simply replace the spaces with underscore. Chapter title. But what if titles are the same? We can probably just make sure that we use indexes as well alongside, something like index as well. Right, so if two chapters have the same title, we will differentiate between them using the index of each chapter. Next, we need to set the content of the chapter. Set content, and this is pretty easy for us because we have the content. Yeah, so this is how we create a chapter, but then, yeah, we need to add it as a book add item. C. So we add the chapters to the book. Then it says there needs to be some styling. Seems like some navigation thingy. Let's do that. Some font, default font. All right, there is some error. See, it says needs of type bytes, right? Needs bytes, but style is some literal. I think it's in code, which converts it to bytes, yeah, using some default UTF encoding. All right, so we don't really need to understand that. It says that it will work with that, and we are okay with that. All right, so there is some table of contents, which needs some chapters. There is a spine. The spine is just a way to list how the chapters should appear in the book. And because we downloaded them sequentially, it means that we need to add them to spine in the same order as we downloaded them. And the spine says that, okay, the book starts with navigation, which is like table of contents probably, and all the chapters. Finally, at the end, we need to do also some boilerplate thingy. Don't even need to understand what it does. Simply tells us to do that. So what's left is table of contents and spine. So I think we can do it this way. So table of contents, it's going to be a list of this HTML thingies. Spine is going to be the same. Spine. But spine starts with navigation. Okay, navigation is actually a string, so we can say, okay, this list is actually either string or this is EPUB HTML, and we can add the chapter not only to the book, but also to table of contents and add it to spine. And then once we have processed all the chapters. We have talk and spine ready, and we can see, so we can say book talk is talk, book spine is spine. Now, one thing that's missing here is cover image, right? So if metadata cover URL, all right, so we need to actually download it, right? Let's see, what can we do? We can say book set cover. Again, some file name and content, create page. By default, it's true, so we need to simply supply some file name and content. File name, we'll do generic cover JPG spec. I don't think like it really matters. We won't be extracting the file name from the URL itself for now. Like, I mean, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then we fix it. And the content, which is what we need to fetch. So it's going to be like cover image, fetch, cover image given metadata URL. And then we can supply it to set cover. What is fetch cover image? It will be quite similar to the fetch HTML, but I think it will be just a tad bit different. Again, it can fail, so that means it must be optional, and it should be, no, it should be string or bytes. Bytes probably. So it's going to be like response request gets URL, raise for status, SQL typing errors, and then instead of text, I think there is content which is like bytes, right? Because image is not a text. Then we can do the same try except fail to fetch story cover image. Let's do it this way. URL. And we return none. And so this is how we can download an image. And only if cover image we can add. Because yeah, if we failed, we don't need to do that. All right, so this looks good to me. Let's test it out. Let's not forget to see how this whole like downloading progress with carriage return works. We're downloading. The moment of truth. See whether we made some mistake somewhere or not. All right, it actually did save as mother of learning EPUB. Here it is. Let's test it out. Okay, so the content is here. The table of contents. Hopefully we can jump chapters. Okay, as you can see, our chapter is somewhat weird. First of all, it starts with chapter, but that is because, as we discussed, this particular book duplicates the chapter. As maybe like extra exercise for you guys, if you want to try, you can give our script an extra parameter whether we want to remove the first paragraph from the chapter content. If that flag is true, then we drop the first paragraph, and this particular book then should be fine. But if we try to fetch another book, for example, Perfect Run, which doesn't have chapter duplicated here. It doesn't need this flag. Let's see how it works. So we can close it. And yeah, nice cover images here. Before we download it, there was one issue that I noticed, is that usually the chapters have titles, and I saw here that when we set content for the chapter, we need to add the chapter header manually. So let's do that. Set content. Right, so it's going to be string where we add chapter title ourselves. That should work a bit better. So our R downloads Mother of Learning. We don't want that. We want to run our RoyalRoad with the Perfect Run book. Let's see how that goes. And yeah, we can also verify that our script works on different books. There are a bit more chapters there, 130. Let's see how it goes. Moment of truth. All right, let's open up the book. Perfect Run. Yay. So the chapter, you can see it's visible. Our table of contents, we can jump and it's there. We can jump back. So as you can see, also this numbering is duplicated. This is because the book itself, whenever we open the chapter, it has 5 in its name. So this is also could be as an extra exercise for you guys. Maybe some flag to, when it's set, you can try to clean up the chapter to remove its numbering. But other than that, it seems to be working nicely. Great. I really hope you enjoyed today's session. It would mean a lot to me if you like and subscribe, but not pushing you. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye.